Good Wednesday to you, everybody in COM 710. Welcome to week boom 7. How's everybody doing? You hanging in there? Hey, week 7, we are only 1 week away from the middle of the semester. And shortly after that, spring break or modular week or whatever they're calling it. So I know you've probably got a lot of tests and projects and things stacking up because this is the time of the semester when that happens. So remember to stay, vitalized and motivated. And in my case, that means caffeinated. So hang on here just a second. Actually, chai tea instead of caffeine on this cold and rainy afternoon where I live. Okay, let's take a quickie look at a couple of housekeeping items. Thank you for your papers. I will have them back to you by the 27th, right? Now, remember, as I said, some of them will, I'll do on Blackboard, and some of them I will do as, PDFs with digital writing thereupon, courtesy of digital writing tablet. I think this is a remarkable too. My only complaint, and it is a minor one, is that it's all black and white. But I imagine putting it in color would, dramatically increase the price. So I'm not going to complain too loudly. Next week, week 8, I will assign your second presentation topics. YouTube, please. Now, some of you have had some problems with that. One person out there is having problems speaking because of a medical issue, and you're like, okay, how can I use YouTube? Okay. Use YouTube. And unless you communicate with me specifically and I give you the thumbs up, you have to make an oral presentation because that's part of the exercise. However you create the video, if you create it using a desk cam, a webcam, like I have here when I make these videos, fine. If you want to use a smart device to make the videos, that's fine. Okay. This is a global technology, a global communication platform. Some might argue it is the global communication platform, at least where, video is concerned. So, you should know a little bit about it and how to use it. I mean, that's what you do. You are, slicky scholars and you know these things. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at questions from last week, week 6. See how you did. I asked you, and I appreciate how well you read and answered the questions from my research. I asked you to take a look at my doctoral research that I did while in Iraq. I think I tell you in the introduction, but part of the motivation for doing that was what I saw as a significant gap between what those who produce social media were saying that it did and would do, and those who use social media were saying what it did and would do. And in particular, there was one book that really jumped out at me when I was thinking about the dissertation and the topic, and that's Schmidt and Cohen's The New Digital Age, right there. In particular, I mean, this is within the first 2 pages. When they wrote something like, like this: being able to do more in the virtual world will make the mechanics of our physical world more efficient. And I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't, but when I was traveling and working in a number of countries and seeing people use communication platforms in the virtual space, I didn't see this efficiency that they talk about. To continue. As digital connectivity reaches the far corners of the globe, new users will employ it to improve a wide range of ineffective market systems behaviors both the most and least advantaged societies. Again, there were certain societies in which, yes, this advantage was going way up, but kind of like building walls around, affluent areas, that although within the area the efficiency went up, that the assumption of the use of the tool as the means to the efficiency meant that those who were excluded from the area, their ability to participate went down. And that's where I, came up with a name for the work, Strangers to the Village, because Marshall McLuhan had said that, digital media has turned us into a village. That is where everybody knows what everybody's doing. Now, he also said that digital media would turn us into villages, little tribal societies in which, we are we and they are they. And you can see that now on things like TikTok and Twitter and YouTube. That is perhaps certainly one of the top three constant themes that you see on these platforms is the bantering back and forth between these subgroups and usually the mocking. There's not a lot of real communication going, oh, so tell me how you see it. And then, tell me, it's something like feminist argument destroyed in 60 seconds. And I'm not picking on feminists, but you know what I'm talking about. So I was reading about all of these wide sweeping benefits and not seeing these wide sweeping benefits for not an insignificant number of people in some areas. I mean, millions. And I thought, okay, and if you compared millions to billions, right now we're back down to small percentages, but people don't see themselves in relationship to percentage. So they don't go, oh, well, yeah, okay, that although the world's population is several billion, or since the world's population is several billion, I guess that my plight puts me in the 0.00000, whatever, 1%. So okay, that's not okay. No, they look at the situation they're in, and they go, this is terrible for me and for my family, my children, my husband, my wife, my relatives. And people don't develop real identity of self as a function of where they are in terms of equations of loss benefit to the population, especially beyond what they can see as a whole. I'm not saying nobody's aware of that, and I'm not saying it doesn't affect an attitude, but I'm saying I'm not run into, especially in distress situations, where people go, well, it's we've got it bad, but those guys over there, all right. So I just wasn't seeing this. Actually, that's sort of what started me poking around. Okay, so I wanted to throw some questions at you that let you chew on, in a real world environment, rather than because we read a lot of theoretical stuff when we're reading Thusen, and except for Vernon, that looked at historically how Adventist World Radio worked in Tanzania. She didn't work in an Adventist radio in Tanzania. She looked at the documents. All right. I wanted to give you a case in which someone didn't look at the documents or hadn't run through the studies, but actually went there and said, okay, does digital media, social media applications, is it changing the world, especially for distressed peoples? All right, well, let's ask the distressed people. So that was the point. Okay, let's take a look at the questions. Why, according to Gardner, do Christians in the Middle East need much more research attention? Do you agree or disagree with the assertion? Okay. And again, remember that we're always after being investigators, not advocators, when we do our research. Now, from the conclusions of our research, or the conclusions that we draw while we're doing our research, we can say, okay, more of this should happen, less of this should happen. That's fine. But within the research, pay attention to the data. Anyway, Lauren, there are several reasons outlined in the text as to why Christians in the Middle East need more research attention. First, though Christians have been found to be the most widely persecuted group in the world, there are no studies that look at their treatment as refugees and displaced people, a displaced people group. And that hits it right on the head. But this is a unique situation, that not only are they forced out of their homes, but the places that they are forced into, nobody wants them there either. So, and I've learned how to play nice with governments and large bureaucratic agencies. It doesn't mean that I have to like what they do. So, for instance, the designations that the UN gives these groups, internally displaced person, as opposed to refugee, have real life consequences for the people that get the labels, because refugees are eligible for certain treatment that internally displaced person, they call them IDPs, are not. And for certain international treatment and opportunity to immigrate, as where internally displaced persons are not. Well, for Christians, especially Christians in hostile areas or areas that are hostile to Christianity, it's almost better if they end up a refugee as opposed to an internally displaced person stuck inside an Islamic country. Because the Islamic country tolerates them so long as they stayed in the designated area. It's sort of like Indians stuck on a reservation, Native Americans, if you like, here in the United States. It's sort of like, okay, we can put up with it. Oh, as soon as they start wandering off, then we have a problem. So yes, this is exactly why I think this problem needs more look, because it's unique. Okay. And then Lauren, you go on to say, I do agree with his points that were made in the text. I also thought it was noteworthy that Gardner pointed out some Christian population in the Middle East make up an ideal group because of their history of displacement. The Syrian Christians in Iraq were some of the oldest, most continuous communities in the country and make up an ideal group for mixed method qualitative and quantitative studies. Okay, and yeah, that's exactly it, because these were stable populations for thousands of years. And now in most places in the Middle East, they're gone. This is unfortunately a unique period in history concerning the relations and the lives of Christians in their historical place of origin, that is the Middle East. Okay, question number 2. According to Gardner's research, how groups like ISIS used SMAs and other global communication platforms to terrorize their victims. In your opinion, is it possible to keep global communication tools like social media applications out of the hands of groups like ISIS? Billy, it's unfortunate, but the use of SMA tools makes individuals vulnerable. For example, Jeff Gardner research noted that the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria was highly skilled using social media to track down, capture, murder its victims. ISIS would also use SMA tools to torture families of users who do not bend to their will or carry out tasks. Nothing short of murder, theft, or recon of suggested targets deemed to be against ISIS. In many cases, individuals were even threatened to give up other colleagues who voiced their opinions against ISIS as well. I don't see a clear way to keep social media applications out of the hands of a group like ISIS simply because of the ease and accessibility of the tool. And that's precisely the problem, or the point. That, remember, communication, like any tool, becomes constructive or destructive depending on how it's used. So right now, where I live today, the weather is rainy and miserable, and it's very cold. If I wanted to keep warm, I could build a fire. All right. Well, depending on how I use that fire, I would order or disorder my circumstances. I would solve a problem or create a problem. So fire used in the fireplace, good. Now I'm warm. I've solved the problem. Fire used on the living room floor, bad. Now, true, I'm warm, but I've created another problem. I'm warm in a way that I don't want to be because my house is on fire. And that is the problem. Derek, I liked I thought what you said was interesting. You said the only way to truly remove social media applications as tools that could be used by ISIS would be to remove access to countries where ISIS is active. Or, for that matter, I will tell you, where any support for terrorists and terrorism is active, which would mean a significant swath of the Middle East. Because these groups were and are funded by very large countries. Iran happens to be one of them. Now, Iran did not fund ISIS, but there are other groups that Iran funds, like Hezbollah. All right, so that's, you're right, but it's just not practical. Okay, question number 3. According to Gardner's research findings, how did IDPs in Northern Iraq feel when using social media applications? Did the IDPs see social media applications as useful tools to resolve their displacement. That is the major issue and the major problem in their life. And this was something else that Schmidt and Cohen spent a good deal of time on, is how all this digitization was going to give us these wonderful tools to solve whatever problem came up. And I thought, okay, so if you're tossed out of your home by a crazy Islamic army, that's a problem. Can you use social media applications to work on the powers that be to solve your problem? Fair question. Nicole, it is in this part of the research that Gardner makes a striking comment that resonated with me. He writes, this pattern of we were viewed but not seen by the world was expressed to one degree or another by all of the Assyrians whom we interviewed. Then Nicole writes, this points to the importance of this research. This must be an unsettling feeling for these people to realize that the world's indifferent to their needs. Gardner further concludes the reason most frequently given for this was not that the IDPs believed that no one saw them, but rather that they believed that those who did see them were indifferent to their deprivations. And yet, having a platform on which to share their stories did create a sense of slight empowerment. In the end, social media applications were not a useful tool to resolve their displacement, not when the world did not see them. And that's exactly, that's exactly what I found, Nicole. In fact, as I note in my research, that when I asked some of them about this, the response I got was roughly equivalent to how do you catch a fish with a hammer? It was just like, like these silly nonsensical jokes, and somebody might say, how many pancakes does it take to shingle a home? You go, oh, I don't know. And they go, their answer is because purple. And you're like, what? How do those two connect? There were reactions like that. Like, how does this connect to me getting out of here? They just didn't see it. Okay. And the reason they didn't see it is that, they were posting information about how horrible their life was, and it was horrible. And nothing seemed to be happening. Now, there were a couple of reasons for that they did not understand. And I'm not saying reasons, the social media was really working and they just didn't get it. No. Number one, they were not aware of the algorithms that run on social media that push down content that generates low commercial value and pushes up content that generates high commercial value. So, somebody moving a cat's arm to play a piano, man, that's money. Push it up. IDP in a refugee camp out in the middle of the desert, who once was, I met an IDP. She was a professor and a professional skydiver, and now she was stuck in the middle of nowhere. In these horrible camps, basically constructed out of shipping containers and then hemmed in with barbed wire. That's kind of a buzzkill, man. That's not a moneymaker. That gets pushed down, and people don't see it. People don't see it. Okay, question number 4. After reading interview summaries in Gardner's Appendix C, select one interview and summarize the interviewee's attitudes about the utility of SMA in a global communication environment. Now, here I give you this question because I wanted you to have a look at how, one of the ways that you can construct a mixed methods project in which you do a quantitative study and then you follow it up with qualitative data. And the quantitative work and quantitative studies, the quantitative research is really good at telling you that there's something happening. This is influencing this. All right. And the statistical probability about, whether it's a significant influence or moderate or low or this kind of stuff. It's not so good at getting at the human why. Why is this happening? Why are they feeling the way that they feel when it comes to using social media and their attitudes about it? So when you sit down and you ask, and I didn't have, the survey that they took, they go, oh, well, I see on question 4, you said, I'd like to ask you about it. All right. I just wanted an open flow of ideas. Okay. Brenda. So there was really no wrong answer to this question. Brenda, you said 19-year-old Sarah had experience using social media platforms. The reason why she stopped using Facebook 2 years ago are unknown. Now, that was interesting because I remember her well, and it wasn't that she didn't have access to it. She, her family, her mother, and her brother both had a smartphone. She just like, no, thank you. But that could be a reason behind her skepticism about social media platforms. A response on whether social media can help IDPs or homes sort of feeds into her general skepticism about social media, the situation, the camp life in general. From this conversation, excuse me, it's clear that social media applications has little or no impact on her, even though she is in the bracket of the population that lives and thrives on social media applications. She reminds me of the day I decided to close my Facebook account. Life happens, and sometimes the noise of social media makes you take a step back and decide things that really matter. For Sandra, I said Sarah, excuse me. It was definitely different and painful circumstance that led to that decision. I pray she is well and healed, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, I spent in that block of time, not just for my dissertation research, but I spent 4 years going back and forth. And within that 4 years, I was there 17 times. And I developed long-standing friendships with some people. And there were some people who just passed in and out of my life within the space of, a half an hour, an afternoon. And I often think about them and I wonder where they are. And I hope that they're well. I hope that what I did in my work, now see, here's back to the difference between investigator and advocator, that what I did in my work has made a difference for people, if not them, for others. Part of what I did with the work is I had another client at the time that worked for an agency deployed by the UN. And this gave me an opportunity to sit down and have a consultation about how to set up refugee camps. I wish that there would be no need to set up refugee camps. All right. But there will be. And when you have to take a group of people that are traumatized and terrorized and contain them within a specific area, you have to take into account, this is my conversation with the member of the UN organization, you have to take into account, and you do, basic needs and basic human behavior. You have to assume that they have to go to the bathroom because they do. So you have to have sanitary facilities to give them a place to go to the bathroom that preserves the dignity for them and keeps disease from running wild throughout the camp. You have to give them access to food and water because we have to have this. And it has to be clean and wholesome. And then I said, and you have to give them access to the global communication platforms. Because one of the striking things that I found among the hundreds and hundreds of refugees that I encountered, and perhaps thousands when I think of all the other countries in the world I've been in, that in Iraq, that I found people who fled in the middle of the night from the Islamic State, and they forgot things like money or their identity papers, which in a country, a severely statist state like Iraq, is that's akin to going outside without your pants on. I mean, you are immediately marked out as someone that just doesn't fit in if you don't have your papers. Okay, but they fled, they forgot money, they forgot their papers, but not a single individual that I spoke with forgot their smartphone or their tablet or their laptop. The priority of staying connected was that high. And so I was able to say, look, you've got to find a way to provide Wi-Fi, and you've got to leverage the social media that is going to be used in the camp to help the people there, to help their psychological situation, their emotional situation, their spiritual situation, their physical situation, because to not address that basic fundamental human need to communicate and connect is as big a mistake in setting up a camp as is not having sanitary facilities to dispose of human waste or clean access to clean water or wholesome food. And it's going to cause problems for those people, both in the immediate while they're stuck in your camp and in the long term. Did that make a difference for some people? I hope so. I don't know. And, that's just kind of how it goes in life. I like to think that we ultimately are not held responsible for the extent of our impact, but we are going to be held responsible for how hard and how consistently we continue to try. Okay. All right, everybody. On that note, have a wonderful, blessed week. I think about you. I pray about you. Moving through your papers now, and I will see you on Blackboard. God bless. Bye-bye.